Captain Jake Morrison stood at the window of his ship watching space bend and twist in ways that hurt his eyes. The alien ships were coming through some kind of gateway that looked like a crack in reality itself. First one ship appeared, then 10, then hundreds. Each ship was bigger than anything humans had ever built. They looked like dark metal cities floating in the emptiness of space around Earth. Jake had been a space captain for 15 years, but he had never seen anything like this. His ship Phoenix Dawn was one of Earth's best warships, but compared to these alien vessels, it looked like a toy boat next to an aircraft carrier. The alien ships kept coming through the gateway until there were thousands of them forming a perfect circle around Earth. Then the gateway closed and space returned to normal, but everything had changed forever. Admiral Linda Hayes was watching the same scene from her command ship, Liberty's Call. She was the top military leader for all of Earth's space forces. Linda had fought in 3 different wars and won them all, but she knew this was different. Her computers were trying to count the enemy ships, but the numbers kept going up. 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 alien vessels. Her entire fleet had maybe 200 ships, and most of those were small patrol boats. The aliens waited for exactly 1 hour after their arrival. Then they sent a message to every human settlement in the solar system. The message came through radio waves, television signals, computer networks, and even personal phones. There was no escaping it. Every human being heard the same words spoken in perfect English by a voice that sounded like it came from a machine. We are the hegemony. We have conquered 47 different species across this galaxy. You are species number 48. You have 2 choices. Submit to our rule and become our workers, or we will destroy every human settlement in your solar system. You have 72 hours to decide. Dr. Paul Bennett was in his laboratory on Earth when the message came through. He was a scientist who studied alien life forms, even though humans had never met any real aliens before today. Paul had spent years reading old radio signals from space and trying to figure out what alien civilizations might be like. He had written books about how humans should prepare for first contact with other species. None of his books had prepared him for this. Paul understood what the alien message really meant. The word workers sounded harmless, but he knew better. He had studied how civilizations conquered other civilizations throughout human history. The aliens were not offering a job. They were offering slavery. The humans would work in alien factories and mines until they died. Their children would be raised to serve alien masters. After a few generations, there would be no free humans left anywhere in the universe. Commander Lisa Morgan was on Mars when the message arrived. She was in charge of the mining colonies on the Red Planet. Lisa had grown up on Mars and considered it her home, just as much as Earth was home to other humans. She looked up at the night sky and could see the alien ships even from Mars. They looked like tiny stars, but she knew each one carried enough weapons to destroy her entire colony. Lisa started getting reports from all the human settlements. The space stations around Jupiter were seeing alien ships there too. The mining operations in the asteroid belt were surrounded. The research base on Saturn's moon Titan reported alien vessels in orbit above them. Everywhere humans lived in space, the aliens had sent ships to watch and wait. The alien message was being repeated every hour. Always the same words in the same mechanical voice. Submit or die. Become workers or be destroyed. 72 hours. To decide. Some humans were already panicking. Others were angry. A few were trying to pretend the whole thing was not really happening. Jake Morrison called a meeting of all his ship captains. They gathered in the main briefing room of Phoenix, Dawn, and looked at each other with grim faces. These were experienced military officers who had trained for war their entire careers, but none of them had trained for this. How do you fight an enemy with thousands of ships when you have only dozens? We need to know what we are really facing, Jake told his officers. Send out scout ships to get closer looks at their vessels. Use passive scanners only. Do not give them any reason to think we are attacking. The scout ships came back with disturbing news. Each alien vessel was at least 5 times bigger than the largest human warship. They had energy shields that could probably stop any weapon humans possessed. Their hull armor was made from materials that human scientists could not identify. Most frightening of all, the alien ships did not seem to have any crew. They were automated war machines controlled by artificial intelligence. Admiral Hayes was meeting with political leaders from every nation on Earth. The meeting was taking place in an underground bunker in Geneva that was supposed to be secret, but everyone knew the aliens were probably listening anyway. The world's presidents and prime ministers were arguing about what to do. Some wanted to surrender immediately. Others wanted to fight. Most just wanted more time to think. "We need to understand what submission really means," said President Carl Rodriguez from the United States. He was a former soldier who had become a politician but still thought like a military man. "Are they offering us a chance to live as slaves? Or are they offering us a slow death with extra steps?" Dr. Bennett had been brought to the meeting to explain what he thought the aliens wanted. "Based on their message and their behavior, I believe the hegemony operates like a galactic empire," Paul explained to the gathered leaders. "They conquer worlds and use the local population as workers. Over time, they breed out any rebellious tendencies. Eventually, the conquered species becomes completely dependent on their masters. It is a form of genocide that takes several generations to complete." The room fell silent as the leaders absorbed this information. They were not just choosing between war and peace. They were choosing between a quick death fighting and a slow death as slaves. Neither option offered much hope for the future of humanity. Outside the bunker, the people of Earth were watching the sky and waiting for their leaders to make the most important decision in human history. The sun was rising over Geneva when Speaker Helen Parker called the emergency session to order. Representatives from every nation on Earth sat in the great hall looking tired and worried. Many had not slept during the long night of debate. They all knew that whatever they decided in the next few hours would determine whether humanity had a future or not. Helen had been the Speaker of the Global Defense Council for only 6 months. She was a lawyer from Canada who had never expected to make decisions about war and peace for the entire human race. Now she stood at the podium, looking out at faces filled with fear and uncertainty. The alien deadline was only 12 hours away. "We have heard from our military experts and our scientists," Helen said in a calm voice that did not show how frightened she felt inside. "Now we must vote. Each representative will cast one vote for their region. The majority will decide for all humanity." General Rick Davis stepped forward to present the final military analysis. He was a tough old soldier who had fought in conflicts all over Earth, but even he looked shaken by what they were facing. Rick had spent the night reviewing every possible battle plan, and none of them offered much hope. "The enemy has approximately 4,000 combat vessels," Rick reported to the assembly. "We have 230 ships that could be considered warships. Most of our vessels are transport ships or civilian craft with light weapons. Our best computer models give us a 2% chance of victory in direct combat." Some representatives gasped when they heard these numbers. Others just stared at the floor. 2% was not really a chance at all. It was just a way of saying that miracles sometimes happen, but you should not count on them. Dr. Susan Webb spoke for the civilian population. She was a teacher from Australia who had been elected to represent ordinary people in these discussions. Susan had been receiving messages from families all over the solar system. Parents on Mars were asking what to tell their children. Workers on the space stations wanted to know if they should try to run or stay and fight. "I have been reading letters from our people in the colonies," Susan told the assembly. A little girl on Titan drew a picture of Earth and asked her mother why the bad aliens want to hurt her grandparents. A father on Mars sent a message saying he would rather die free than live as a slave. These are the people we are making this decision for. Captain Alex Turner had returned from a dangerous scouting mission just hours before the vote. His small ship had gotten close enough to the alien fleet to take detailed scans without being detected. What he found was both encouraging and terrifying. "The aliens are confident," Alex reported. "Maybe too confident. Their ships are in standard formation with minimal patrols. They have not activated all their defensive systems. They clearly expect us to surrender without a real fight. This might give us a small advantage if we choose to resist." Alex paused and looked around the room. "But I want to be clear about what resistance means. Most of us will die. Our cities might be destroyed. Human civilization as we know it will probably end. The only question is whether we end it ourselves by surrendering or whether we make the aliens work for their victory. The debate continued for hours. Representatives stood one by one to explain their positions. The delegate from Africa spoke about how his people had resisted colonial powers in the past and won their freedom eventually. The representative from Asia argued that survival was more important than pride, and that living slaves could someday become free again. The European delegate reminded everyone that freedom was not just about humans alive today, but about future generations. If humanity surrendered now, their children and grandchildren would never know what it meant to be free. The representative from South America said that death with honor was better than life without dignity. Some representatives changed their minds several times during the debate. The decision was too big and too final for any easy answers. They were choosing not just for themselves, but for every human being who would ever be born. If they chose wrong, there might not be any humans born in the future. Captain Jake Morrison was allowed to address the assembly as a representative of the military forces. He stood at the podium in his dress uniform, knowing that his words might be the last speech any human officer ever gave to a free government. "I have been a soldier my entire adult life," Jake said. "I took an oath to defend humanity against all enemies. I have never faced an enemy like this before. The smart choice is probably surrender. The safe choice is definitely surrender. But I did not become a soldier to make smart and safe choices." Jake looked around the room, meeting the eyes of as many representatives as he could. "If we surrender, we might live longer, but we will not live better. Our children will grow up as servants to alien masters. They will never know what we are giving up. Maybe that is a mercy. Maybe it is a tragedy. I cannot make that choice for humanity, but I can tell you what choice I am making for myself." The final speeches were emotional and difficult to hear. Representatives wept as they spoke about the futures they were choosing or abandoning. Some talked about their own children and what kind of world they wanted to leave behind. Others spoke about duty and honor and the meaning of being human. When all the speeches were finished, Helen Parker called for the vote. Each representative would stand and announce their choice: surrender or resistance, peace or war, slavery or death. There were 859 representatives in the chamber, and each vote would be recorded for history. The African Union voted for resistance. The European Federation voted for resistance. The South American Alliance voted for resistance. One by one, the regions made their choices. Some votes were close. The Asian coalition was split almost evenly, but chose resistance by a single vote. The North American states voted unanimously for war. Prime Minister Karen Lewis from Australia was the last to vote. Her region had debated longer than any other. The Australian colonies in space were small and vulnerable. They would probably be destroyed quickly if fighting started. But Karen stood and cast her vote for resistance with a clear voice that carried across the silent chamber. The final count was 847 votes for resistance and 12 votes for surrender. Humanity had chosen to fight an impossible war rather than accept certain slavery. Helen Parker recorded the vote in the official record and then activated the communication system to send humanity's answer to the waiting alien fleet. President Rodriguez composed the message that would be broadcast to the hegemony. It was short and simple because there was nothing complicated about their decision. "We have considered your offer and we must respectfully decline. Earth and all human settlements will remain free. We are prepared to defend our independence." The message was transmitted on all frequencies toward the alien fleet. Within minutes, they received a reply that was even shorter than their own message. "Your choice has been recorded. Pacification will begin in 12 hours. Surrender is no longer possible." The vote was over and the war was about to begin. Admiral Hayes stood in the command center of her flagship, watching dozens of screens showing activity across the solar system. Humanity had 12 hours before the alien attack began, and every second counted. She had already activated Operation Freefall, which was Earth's emergency war plan. The operation had a name that meant falling without control, but Linda hoped they could find some control before they hit the ground. The plan was simple in concept, but nearly impossible to execute. Every human settlement would become a fortress. Every civilian ship would become a weapon. Every mining laser would be turned into a military tool. Every person who could hold a weapon would join the fight. It was not a plan designed to win the war, but to make the aliens pay as much as possible for their victory. Engineer Danny Cooper was working without sleep in the orbital shipyards above Earth. His team was modifying the defense platforms that protected the planet from asteroids and space debris. These platforms had been built to destroy small rocks, not alien warships, but Danny thought he could change that with some creative engineering. "We need to strip out the safety systems," Danny told his workers as they crawled through the narrow maintenance tunnels of Platform 7. "These torpedo launchers were designed to fire slowly and carefully. We need them to fire fast and often, even if they burn out after a few shots." The work was dangerous because they were removing the systems that prevented the weapons from exploding. Several platforms had already been destroyed by accidents during the modifications. Danny had lost 6 good engineers, but the work continued because stopping meant certain defeat. On Mars, Colonel Nancy Foster was dealing with 2 problems at the same time. She needed to evacuate civilians from the areas that would become battlefields, while also preparing those same areas for defense. Nancy had grown up on Mars and knew every tunnel and canyon on the Red Planet. She planned to use that knowledge to make the aliens fight for every meter of ground. The Mars colonies had been built inside underground complexes to protect people from radiation and dust storms. These same tunnels would now protect them from alien weapons. Nancy was sealing some tunnels and opening others to create a maze that would confuse invaders. She was also moving supplies and weapons to hidden storage areas that could support resistance fighters for months or even years. "Every family needs to pack one bag and report to the deep shelters," Nancy announced over the colony communication system. "Take only what you need to survive. Everything else stays behind to help our soldiers fight." Dr. Bennett was working in a secure laboratory beneath the lunar surface. He had been given access to pieces of alien technology that human ships had collected over the years. Most of these pieces had come from crashed alien probes that had visited the solar system in the past. Paul had been studying them for months, trying to understand how alien weapons and shields worked. Paul had made an important discovery about the alien ships. They all seemed to be connected by some kind of communication network that helped coordinate their shields and weapons. If humans could disrupt this network or destroy the ship that controlled it, the entire alien fleet might become vulnerable. The problem was finding that control ship among thousands of vessels and then somehow destroying it. Captain Morrison was meeting with volunteer ship captains in the briefing room of Phoenix Dawn. These were civilians who had offered to fight alongside the military even though their ships were not built for war. Most were cargo haulers and passenger transports with crews that had never fired a weapon in anger. "I will not lie to you about our chances," Jake told the volunteer captains. "Most of us will die in the first battle. Our ships are not designed to fight warships. Our weapons are not powerful enough to penetrate alien shields, but we have 2 advantages they do not expect." Jake activated a holographic display showing the alien fleet formation. "First, they think we will surrender at the first sign of real resistance. They are not prepared for humans who will fight to the death. Second, they have never faced opponents who will sacrifice everything for a small tactical advantage." Captain Beth Williams raised her hand to ask a question. She was the owner of a cargo ship called Second Chance that she had converted into a missile platform by welding weapon pods to the hull. Beth was 60 years old and had been hauling freight between planets for 30 years. She had never expected to become a warrior, but the aliens had not given her much choice. "What exactly do you want us to do when the fighting starts?" Beth asked. "Our ships are slow and clumsy compared to military vessels. We will be easy targets." Jake nodded because Beth was asking the right questions. "Your job is to create chaos and confusion in their formation. Fly your ships in unpredictable patterns. Make them waste ammunition shooting at targets that do not matter. Draw their fire away from our real warships. Most importantly, make them think we have more ships than we actually do." The preparation work continued across all human settlements. On the space stations around Jupiter, workers were building improvised weapons from mining equipment. The research base on Titan was turning scientific instruments into sensors that could track alien ship movements. Even the small outposts in the asteroid belt were preparing to fight. Commander Lisa Morgan was coordinating the defense of the Mars orbital facilities. These were the shipyards and supply depots that kept the Mars colonies running. Lisa knew the aliens would try to capture these facilities intact because they were valuable. This gave her an idea for a very dangerous plan. "We are going to booby trap every important facility," Lisa announced to her staff. "If the aliens want our infrastructure, they can have it, but it will explode the moment they try to use it. We would rather destroy everything we built than let them steal it." The plan required volunteers to stay behind and manually trigger the explosives when alien troops arrived. These volunteers knew they were choosing certain death, but dozens of people stepped forward anyway. They would hide in sealed bunkers until the aliens took control of the facilities, and then detonate charges that would destroy everything, including themselves. As the deadline approached, Admiral Hayes received reports from commanders across the solar system. Earth's orbital defenses were as ready as they could be in such a short time. Mars had been turned into a fortress planet with underground bases and hidden weapon sites. The outer colonies were prepared to fight guerrilla campaigns that could last for years. Captain Turner was leading a group of scout ships on a final reconnaissance mission. His job was to identify which alien vessel was controlling the enemy fleet network. Alex had found several candidates but was not sure which one was the real command ship. The aliens had been clever about hiding their most important vessels among hundreds of similar-looking ships. "I think it is the big one in the center of their formation," Alex reported to Admiral Hayes over a secure communication channel. "It is about twice the size of their other capital ships and it has different antenna arrays. But I cannot be completely sure without getting closer, and that would probably get me killed." Admiral Hayes thanked Alex for his report and began planning the most important battle in human history. She had identified 3 possible command ships and would have to attack all 3 simultaneously. This would require splitting her small fleet into even smaller groups, which would make each group very vulnerable to counterattack. The alien deadline was now only 2 hours away. Across human space, families were saying goodbye to each other, not knowing if they would ever meet again. Soldiers were checking their weapons and equipment one last time. Ship captains were reviewing battle plans they hoped would work, but expected to fail. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of Phoenix Dawn looking at Earth through the main viewport. The planet looked peaceful and beautiful, with white clouds swirling over blue oceans. It was hard to believe that in just a few hours this peaceful scene would become a battlefield where the future of humanity would be decided. "All ships report ready for combat," his communications officer announced. Jake activated the general communication system to speak to every human ship in the fleet. "This is Captain Morrison to all vessels. We are about to fight the most important battle in human history. We probably cannot win, but we can show these aliens that humans do not surrender easily. Make them remember this day. Make them regret they ever came to our system." The countdown to war had begun. The war began exactly 12 hours after humanity rejected the alien ultimatum. The first sign of battle was not the sound of weapons firing, but the sight of space itself, seeming to catch fire as energy beams crossed the darkness between Earth and the alien fleet. Admiral Hayes watched from the Bridge of Liberty's call as her outer defense line engaged the enemy vanguard near the asteroid belt. Captain Turner was leading the first wave of human fighters in a desperate attack against 300 alien interceptors. His squadron had only 20 ships, but they flew in patterns no computer could predict. Turner had trained his pilots to ignore military doctrine and fight like wild animals instead of disciplined soldiers. The aliens had studied human military tactics, but they had never seen humans fight without any tactics at all. "Break formation and attack individual targets," Turner ordered his pilots over the radio. "Do not try to stay together. Make them chase you through the asteroid field. Use the rocks as cover and weapons." The human fighters scattered in all directions like a school of fish being attacked by sharks. The alien interceptors tried to follow, but their artificial intelligence was programmed to fight in organized formations. When the humans abandoned all organization, the alien computers became confused and started making mistakes. Turner's fighter was damaged by enemy fire, but still flying when he led 3 alien ships into a collision with a large asteroid. The explosion destroyed all 3 enemy vessels and nearly killed Turner, but his ship survived with half its systems offline. He managed to limp back toward the human fleet while his squadron continued their chaotic attack. Meanwhile, Colonel Foster was implementing her defense plan on Mars. The alien landing ships had bypassed the orbital battle and come straight down to the planet's surface. Nancy watched from her command bunker as hundreds of enemy troops poured out of their transport ships and began marching toward the main colony. The aliens moved in perfect formation across the Martian landscape like a parade of metal soldiers. They had advanced armor and energy weapons, but they did not understand the terrain. Nancy waited until the enemy troops were deep in the canyon system before she triggered her first surprise. "Detonate charges in sections 7 through 12, Nancy ordered her demolition teams. The canyon walls exploded in a chain reaction that buried hundreds of alien soldiers under tons of rock and sand. The surviving aliens took cover and began advancing more carefully, but they were now walking into Nancy's real trap. She had turned the Martian tunnel system into a three-dimensional maze where humans could attack from above, below, and behind. Back in space, Captain Morrison was leading Task Force Alpha on their desperate mission to destroy the alien command ship. His fleet had used Jupiter's gravity field to accelerate beyond normal speeds and approach the enemy formation from an unexpected angle. The plan was working so far, but the hardest part was still ahead. "Enemy escorts are moving to intercept us," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Gary Stone. 12 heavy cruisers and at least 30 smaller ships. Jake studied the tactical display showing the alien command ship surrounded by its protective fleet. The target was enormous even by alien standards and bristled with weapons and defensive systems. Getting close enough to attack it would require breaking through multiple layers of enemy ships. "Signal the volunteer ships to begin their attack runs," Jake ordered. "Tell them to focus on the escort vessels and draw as much fire as possible, away from the command ship." Captain Beth Williams received the attack order aboard her converted cargo ship Second Chance. She had welded missile launchers to her hull and loaded every available space with ammunition, but her ship was still basically a flying warehouse pretending to be a warship. Beth knew she probably would not survive the next few minutes, but she was determined to make those minutes count. "All volunteer ships, this is Second Chance beginning attack run," Beth announced on the radio. "Follow my lead and aim for the big ones." The civilian ships charged toward the alien escort fleet like an avalanche of metal and determination. Most of them were destroyed within seconds of entering weapons range, but their sacrifice created the opening Morrison needed. While the aliens were focusing on the charging civilian ships, Task Force Alpha slipped past the outer defenses and closed to attack range of the command ship. Dr. Bennett was monitoring the battle from his lunar laboratory and providing tactical advice based on his analysis of alien technology. Paul had discovered that the alien command ship was indeed controlling the shield network for the entire fleet. If Morrison could destroy that ship, the cascade effect might disable hundreds of other alien vessels. "The command ship has 3 main shield generators," Paul reported to Morrison over a secure channel. "You need to concentrate all your firepower on the forward generator array. If you can overload it, the feedback should destroy the other 2 generators automatically." Jake received Bennett's information just as his ship came under heavy fire from the alien command vessel. Phoenix Dawn shook as enemy energy beams struck her hull, but her shields held long enough for Jake to line up his attack. He fired every torpedo and missile his ship carried at the target Paul had identified. The explosions lit up space like a miniature sun as dozens of human weapons struck the alien shield generator. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen, and Jake thought the attack had failed. Then the alien ship's forward shields flickered and died. Secondary explosions began rippling across the command vessel's hull as its own systems overloaded. Admiral Hayes saw the cascade effect begin as alien ships throughout the fleet suddenly found their shields failing. This was the moment she had been waiting for since the battle began. Every human ship that was still able to fight opened fire on the nearest alien vessel now that their defenses were down. "All ships concentrate fire on targets of opportunity," Hayes ordered. "They are vulnerable now, but it will not last long. Make every shot count." Captain Williams had somehow survived the initial attack and was still fighting in her battered cargo ship. When the alien shields failed, she found herself in perfect position to attack a heavy cruiser that had been trying to kill her for the past 10 minutes. Beth fired her remaining missiles at point-blank range and watched with satisfaction as the enemy ship broke apart. but the victory came at a terrible cost. Beth's ship was leaking atmosphere from dozens of holes, and her engines were failing. She knew Second Chance would not make it back to friendly space, but she had accomplished her mission. The aliens would remember the cargo ship that refused to surrender. On Mars, Colonel Foster was leading a counterattack against alien troops who had managed to reach the main colony entrance. The enemy soldiers were tough and well-armed, but they had never fought opponents who knew every tunnel and hiding place in their own territory. Nancy's fighters appeared from concealed positions to attack the aliens from behind, and then disappeared, back into the maze. "They are retreating to their landing ships," reported Sergeant Kevin Hall over the radio. "Should we pursue them?" Nancy considered the tactical situation. The aliens were pulling back, but they were not defeated. This was probably just the first wave of a much larger invasion. She decided to let them go and prepare for the next attack. "Let them retreat," Nancy ordered. "We hurt them badly, but they will be back with more troops. Use this time to resupply and treat the wounded." Captain Turner had managed to get his damaged fighter back to Admiral Hayes's flagship, where repair crews were working frantically to fix every ship that could still fly. Alex's squadron had been reduced to just 6 operational fighters, but they had destroyed or damaged more than 50 alien interceptors. The odds were still terrible, but they were slightly better than before. The battle continued for hours as human and alien fleets hammered each other across millions of kilometers of space. Humanity was losing ships faster than they could afford, but the aliens were discovering that these humans fought with a desperation that made every victory expensive. Dr. Bennett was analyzing the battle data and making a disturbing discovery. The alien fleet was larger than anyone had realized. For every ship the humans destroyed, 2 more appeared from somewhere else in the formation. The cascade effect had worked, but it was not enough to change the outcome of the war. Admiral Hayes received Bennett's report just as her own ship came under concentrated attack from 6 alien cruisers. Liberty's Call was one of humanity's most powerful warships, but she could not survive this kind of punishment for long. Linda gave orders to abandon the non-essential sections of the ship and concentrate all power on weapons and shields. "We are not retreating," Hayes announced to her crew over the ship's communication system. "We came here to fight, and we are going to keep fighting until there is nothing left to fight with." The battle raged on, with neither side able to achieve complete victory. The aliens had more ships and better technology, but the humans had something the aliens had never encountered before. They had the absolute refusal to give up even when defeat was certain. Captain Morrison's ship, Phoenix Dawn, was burning from a dozen different fires, but Jake refused to give the order to abandon ship. His attack on the alien command vessel had succeeded beyond all expectations. The massive enemy ship was listing badly, with explosions still rippling across its hull. More importantly, the shield cascade was spreading through the alien fleet faster than their computers could compensate. Dr. Bennett was monitoring the cascade effect from his lunar bunker and could barely believe what he was seeing. The alien network that had seemed so sophisticated was actually vulnerable to exactly the kind of chaotic attack humans specialized in. When one major node failed, the other ships tried to compensate by increasing their own power output, which caused them to overload as well. "The cascade is spreading faster than I calculated," Paul reported to Admiral Hayes. "At this rate, half their fleet will have shield failures within the next hour." But Paul also noticed something else in his sensor readings that made his blood run cold. The alien fleet was not just losing shields randomly. They were deliberately shutting down their defensive systems ship by ship in a pattern he had never seen before. The aliens were doing something that no military computer would ever recommend. Admiral Hayes saw the same pattern developing on her tactical displays. Enemy ships across the battle zone were powering down their weapons and shields. At first, she thought this might be some kind of surrender, but the alien vessels were not retreating or sending surrender signals. They were just stopping their attacks and waiting. Captain Turner was leading the surviving human fighters in attacks against disabled alien ships when he noticed that the enemy interceptors had stopped trying to shoot him down. The alien fighters were still flying in formation, but they were no longer firing their weapons. Turner had been in combat long enough to know this was not normal behavior for any military force. "All fighter squadrons, this is Turner," Alex announced over the radio. "The aliens have stopped shooting. I repeat, the enemy has ceased fire. Continue your attacks, but watch for some kind of trap. On Mars, Colonel Foster was experiencing the same strange phenomenon. The alien ground troops who had been fighting desperately to capture the colony entrances were now standing motionless, in the open. Nancy could see them through her periscope, but they were not taking cover or advancing. They were just waiting for something. "Cease fire," Nancy ordered her troops. "Something is happening, but I do not know what. Keep your weapons ready, but do not shoot unless they start moving again." The silence that fell over the battlefield was more frightening than the noise of combat had been. Both sides waited and watched each other without understanding what was happening. Then the aliens sent a message that was broadcast on all human communication frequencies simultaneously. The voice that spoke was different from the mechanical tone they had used before. This voice sounded almost organic, as if it came from a living being instead of a computer. The message was short, but it changed everything humans thought they knew about their enemies. "We request immediate cessation of hostilities for the purpose of emergency diplomatic contact. We have never encountered a species with your behavioral characteristics. Our previous analysis of your capabilities was incomplete. We wish to discuss terms for coexistence rather than conquest." Admiral Hayes was the first human to respond to this message. She had been preparing for death or victory, but not for negotiation. Linda had spent her entire career fighting wars, and she was not sure how to stop fighting one, especially when she was not sure if she was winning or losing. "This is Admiral Hayes, Commander of Earth Defense Forces. We are willing to discuss terms, but we will not lower our defenses while negotiations are taking place. Our ships will maintain combat readiness and our ground forces will hold their positions." The alien response came within minutes. "Your defensive preparations are understood and accepted. We are sending a single unarmed vessel to your flagship for direct communication. We must discuss what we have learned about your species during this engagement." Captain Morrison was close enough to Admiral Hayes's position to see the alien diplomatic ship approach. It was smaller than their warships, but still impressive by human standards. The vessel approached slowly with all weapon systems clearly powered down. Jake kept his guns trained on it anyway because trusting aliens completely would be foolish. Dr. Bennett was frantically analyzing all the data from the battle, trying to understand what had caused this dramatic change in alien behavior. The hegemony had conquered 47 different species and never offered to negotiate with any of them. Something about humanity's resistance had surprised them in ways Paul could not yet comprehend. The alien diplomat was unlike anything humans had expected. Instead of the mechanical voice they had heard before, this being spoke with emotional inflections and seemed genuinely curious about human psychology. The diplomat explained that the hegemony had never encountered a species willing to accept certain death rather than submit to conquest. "Every species we have conquered chose survival over independence when faced with overwhelming force," the alien explained to Admiral Hayes during their communication session. "Your species chose differently, and we do not understand why. Our computer models cannot predict the behavior of beings who prefer death to slavery." Admiral Hayes found herself in the strange position of explaining human nature to an alien intelligence that had conquered nearly 50 worlds. "Freedom is more important to us than life itself. We would rather die as free beings than live as slaves. This is not logical, but it is who we are." The alien diplomat was silent for several minutes, as if processing this information through systems that had never encountered such concepts before. When it spoke again, there was something like respect in its voice. "We have never seen warriors fight so desperately against impossible odds. Your people continued attacking even when your ships were destroyed around them. Your planet-based forces refused to surrender even when surrounded. This behavior is unprecedented in our experience." Captain Turner was listening to the diplomatic communication from his fighter and trying to understand what this meant for the future. Were the aliens offering peace, or were they just confused by human behavior? Alex had seen too much combat to trust enemy promises, but he was willing to listen if it meant fewer humans would die. Colonel Foster was also monitoring the negotiations from her command bunker on Mars. The alien ground troops were still motionless, but Nancy kept her weapons trained on them. If this was some kind of trick, she wanted to be ready to resume fighting immediately. Dr. Bennett was beginning to understand what had happened. The hegemony was not evil in the way humans understood evil. They were a galactic civilization that conquered other species because those species always chose to be conquered when faced with superior force. Humanity was the first species to choose death over submission, and this had fundamentally changed how the aliens viewed the nature of intelligent life. "You have taught us something we did not know was possible," the alien diplomat continued. "Intelligent beings can value abstract concepts like freedom more than concrete things like survival. This suggests that intelligence itself may be more complex than we previously understood." Admiral Hayes realized that humanity had accidentally proven something important about the nature of consciousness and free will. By choosing to fight an impossible war, they had demonstrated that intelligence was not just about survival and reproduction, but also about values and principles that might be more important than life itself. The negotiations continued for hours, as both sides tried to understand each other. The aliens were not offering surrender, but they were offering something that had never been offered to any other species. They were offering recognition of humanity as equals rather than subjects. "We propose a treaty of mutual recognition," the alien diplomat finally announced. "Your species will maintain complete independence over your current territories. In exchange, you will not interfere with our operations in other parts of the galaxy. We will study your behavior patterns to better understand the nature of intelligence itself." It was not the victory humanity had hoped for, but it was something no other species had ever achieved. By choosing defiance over survival, humans had earned the respect of a galactic empire and secured their freedom for future generations. Captain Morrison looked around at the stars and the alien fleet that still surrounded Earth. The war was ending, not with victory or defeat, but with understanding. Humanity had chosen to fight impossible odds, and in doing so had discovered that some things really were more important than survival. The day humanity chose defiance over survival became the day they learned that sometimes the choice to fight for freedom is more important than winning the fight itself.